Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm Devin Dickinson with Lauren once again. Thank you for joining us, Lauren.
Thanks for having me here.
So I was thinking about money, right?
Yes.
And I realized that I think about money a lot. And I've been conflicted because I want to know, is thinking about money a lot, is that wrong? And I think this is a great question for us to explore in this podcast today. Because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably ambitious. You probably have big goals, many of them being financial. And the Bible talks about this a lot. It it says very clearly that it's easier for the camel to go through an eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Goal, right? Like, that's very conflicting. And so a lot of people might go, oh, well, yeah, rich people, Elon Musk or whatever. Well, I'm going to tell you, listen, if you live in America, you're rich, right? Like, compared to the rest of the world, like, all of us are rich. And so I started thinking about this. I thought it'd be a great topic for a podcast.
Yeah. I want to start off with a question that I think probably everyone's going to ask and not feel confident about their answer, but I want to get your thoughts on this. How should we understand the Bible's warning that cautions us against wealth when we are in business or we are leaderships or are leaders or entrepreneurs?
Yeah. The Bible does talk about money a lot. Like a ton. People think like, well, the Bible doesn't talk about money. Oh, really? You haven't read it then, right? Because it talks about prosperity. It talks about wealth. There's plenty of wealthy people in the Bible that have been very impactful for the kingdom. And not plenty, probably more of the Bible characters are wealthy in the stories, especially in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, Joseph Arimathea was a wealthy man that buries Jesus. Boaz, right, was a wealthy man that changed the course as part of Jesus' lineage, right? There's so many people in the Bible that literally they point out, the Bible makes it a point to point out their wealth. Solomon, obviously. But there becomes this understanding today where all that we do is talk about how wealth is this root of evil, right? And so in the pursuit of it, right? But really the Bible says that the love of money is where evilness starts, right? And so for me, this is where I get conflicted, right? So I think about it a lot, right? But I would say that for me, part of what I've been gifted with, we all have gifts. I feel like one of my gifting has been the creation of wealth, the ability to create wealth. And so for me, I'm conflicted because I think, well, if this is my gifting that God has given me, and the Bible is very clear about using the talents and the gifts that he's given us, and that we're supposed to multiply those and to grow it and not just be satisfied with what he's given us, but to grow it, right? So how do I have the right attitude towards my gift versus making my gift an idol or a god? And for me, I believe this is kind of the dividing line, right? Are you focusing on enhancing and growing your gift that God has given you, or are you worshiping the gift that God has given you?
How do you keep your wealth from becoming your primary source of security?
Oh man, this is a difficult question, right? Because in all honesty, and I like to be transparent and honest on this podcast, when you have money in the bank, you feel a sense of security, right? There's this, and the Bible talks about that, right? Like in Proverbs, it talks about it. And I think that's wise, right? Dave Ramsey talks about this all the time, right? That's just wisdom, right? Being financially shrewd is a wise thing to do that the Bible talks about. When we put our faith, when we put our trust in dollars and cents, that is, once again, now that becomes our God. Yeah. There's a difference between financially shrewd and putting our faith and our trust in those finances. And I think, there's a story in the Old Testament. Again, kind of the difference between a gift, something that God has gifted you with, and making that gift a God. So there's a story in the Old Testament when the Israelites, they were slaves. They were slaves in Egypt, straight up slaves, right? They had nothing. If you watch Charlton Heston, right, and he leads the people out of Egypt, they go from slaves, but actually when they enter the desert, they become quite wealthy. And the reason why they were wealthy is God told them that, after the last plague, where the firstborn die, they go to their neighbors, the Egyptians, and they ask them for money. And the Egyptians literally give them gold. And they just say, here's our gold, here's our silver, leave our country. And so they go from slaves with nothing, being beaten and having to build pyramids or whatever they did, right, to being in the middle of the desert with all of this wealth that was created overnight. And so what happens is now they're in the desert, and then Moses goes up on top of the mountain, and he disappears for like 40 days. While he's gone, they start freaking out, and they're like, where's our God? Where's Moses? Where's our leader? And they look around, and what happens is they make this idol that they begin worshiping. And it said it was a golden calf. Well, let's think about that. Where did they get that gold from? Where did they get enough? They were slaves. Where did they get the gold from to make a giant golden calf? Well, the answer was the gift that the Egyptians gave them. The gold that was a gift to them, they melted down and turned into an idol. And there's such a metaphor here that God gives us gifts in our lives that we often turn into idols. And so let me say that again. God will give you gifts that we as sinful people turn into idols. And this is wealth, right? So wealth can be a gift, but we can also melt it down and turn it into our idol, what we worship. And so you think, oh yeah, those evil rich people. Well, let me stop you right there, because it's not just wealth. Anything can become your idol. Anything that will take the place of God and the focus of your life. If the focus of your life comes off of God and on your gifting, you've created an idol. That could be, children's sports. I know we get wrapped up in it. My wife and I used to get wrapped up in children's sports, right? Like when all of a sudden you're missing every Sunday because you want to go to a tournament every single freaking week. And next thing you know, you care more about coming in first place in some tournament in Iowa than you do about your Lord and Savior, right? Mm-hmm. Or it could be your gifting, like you're musically inclined, or the various pursuits of your life, or travel, or you name it. Anything can take that gift. I'm not talking about missing church, but I'm talking about what takes the focus off of God and you put it on something else in your life. You've now created an idol. You basically taken that gift, because oftentimes it's what we're good at, right? It's what we're good at. So let's say you're musically inclined. God gave you a gift, and you take that music and now you're using it, and that's your entire focus. What makes you happy. It's what you think about. It's what you focus on. And it's what you truly will even compromise your life for. So I think all the time about different people have different giftings. And when does that gift become an idol? Well, that's the challenge of our life. And so I started this podcast with the statement that said, I think about money a lot. Is that wrong? And so for me, I have to constantly evaluate. And this is not a one-time thing. Lauren, this is what I want people to take with them, right? So this is not a check it and you're good kind of thing, right? I have to constantly check myself that I don't take something that God has given me as a gift and turn it into my idol. And just because I didn't last year doesn't mean that I'm not going to do it this year. Yeah. And at each of these different levels in our life, you have to constantly reevaluate. And so this is a challenge because it can be a problem. And I know you're probably listening going, I want to hear how money's great all the time. No, it can be a problem. It can become your idol. Wealth can become your idol. And if you're passionate and you're someone pursuing your dreams and you're an entrepreneur, listen, you better try to make money. That's your job, right? Like it just can't be your God.
Mm-hmm. How can we ensure financial success doesn't become the most important things in our life?
I think for me, I check it against two particular things, right? So the Bible is pretty clear about giving, right? We can, this podcast is not about whether tithing is biblical or not. I don't want to hear a bunch of comments about tithing's an Old Testament, listen, I'm not talking about that, okay? I tithe, right? But the Bible is pretty freaking clear about generosity, right? So I personally one of the tests that God has convicted me, I'm not telling you, but for me, God has personally convicted me that I am to tithe and I am to give. So I tithe. Tithe means 10%. Giving is above that, right? So this is something that Cindy and I have set up in our lives, kind of this hard and fast rule, right? This is just what we do. This is hard and fast. And so a lot of people they're watching this podcast going, oh, great, just give me the rules and I'll follow the rules and I'll be good, right? So I'm going to tell you, that's the first part of it, right? So we have this set of rules that's kind of this, first and foremost, I have to do this, right? This is the starting place. So for me, it's like, okay, great. I did that. I know at least my spirit is trying to stay correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the second piece is where I have to check my heart condition, because simply following a set of rules does not mean my heart condition is correct, right?
Yes.
So the second thing, Lauren, that we try to do is to check our heart, right? So just because I gave and I checked this box, I tithed and I gave to these organizations, does not necessarily mean that my heart condition is correct. And this is where I have to check myself. And this is what I challenge everyone to do, to constantly check yourself. Because this is where you go, well, just because you do the right thing doesn't mean that you're right. Does that make sense? Just because you say the right thing, do the right thing, does not mean that your heart is correct.
Because you're not doing it from the right spot.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Right? Because over here, I'm just doing it so I don't feel guilty.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean that I haven't made it my God.
You don't feel guilty or you think others are watching.
Yeah. So this side is the heart condition. And this is where, for me personally, I do my devotional. The reason why we're having this podcast is because it was something from my devotional where God was challenging me. God was challenging my heart condition. God was saying, hey, I think we're getting a little too off focus, right? You know, I gave you a gift. Don't make it your God. And so I have to constantly evaluate. This side is a lot more easy for me because I've done the giving now for such a long time. I would love to be able to just check that box and just say, hey, I'm all good, right? But the challenging side is to constantly evaluate my heart, because the Bible talks about if we're faithful with little things, he's going to make us ruler of much. So as you kind of increase at each level, you have to constantly reevaluate.
What are some ways we can use our wealth to align with our faith?
I think I'll share for me personally. So I think wealth was a tool that God has blessed us with to increase the kingdom. Okay. And so like there's things that, like I said, we'll tithe. And again, I don't need to hear your comments about whether tithing's Old Testament or New Testament. I don't care about that. Right. But you need to be a generous person. And when I say generous, like you need to be changing the world around you. And I'm going to say that again. You need to be changing the world around you. If you're not a generous person, because a generous person gives of him or herself to increase and grow and make the world around them better. And I'm going to say to make it like the kingdom of God. Everything that you should be doing in your life should be stemming from that, right? So how do you live your life? How do you spend your time? How do you spend your money? Because again, we're talking about money, but I'm talking about generosity, right? We should be growing the world around us. And so for me, before I had money, you know, my wife and I shared a car, right? And we would give what we had, but frankly, that was not impacting to anybody. But what we had at the time was time. Mm-hmm. And so I decided, you know what? I don't have a lot of money, but I can do big brothers, big sisters. And so I started doing big brothers, big sisters, and giving of myself and giving of my time. And God has continued to multiply that in my life over the years. And so what I did when I was 25 looks different than what I'm doing right now at 53, totally different. But it's always been trying to grow the world around me through generosity. And that generosity means money, it means time, it means attitude, it means relationships, it means growing those around you. This podcast is done not so that I could have 1 million followers, right? It's not for that. It's so that I can be generous with what God has given me and help others grow to be the best that they can be, and grow their gifts. And so having a generous spirit in everything that you do is what I'm challenging you to do. And so that might mean time. That might mean money. Right now, there might be an organization that literally God's put on your heart that you need to go and you need to give to. There might be volunteer time out. And maybe it's simply parking cars on Sunday morning. Maybe that's where you start. Maybe it's giving 2% tomorrow. Maybe that's where you start. But you have to change this inward me kind of view and start giving of yourself externally. And when you do, that's a generous spirit. And it's not just, oh, I threw a few dollars in the offering plate. That's not a generous spirit. That's not who you are. I love the story of Alexander the Great. I don't even know if it's true, right? But I'm going to say it because I've heard it enough times that I'm going to act like it's true. But where a beggar comes up to Alexander and he flips him what would be, I don't know, $500 or something in today's day and age, right? I'll call it $1,000 because I don't know if the story's true or not. Mm-hmm. And people look at him and go, why did you give him $1,000? $10 would have been enough for the beggar. And he goes, yeah, but that's not it. What I give reflects myself, not what their need is. And so how much you've been given, you have this ability to live your life abundantly and generously and leave a legacy around you.
What's one thing we can all do today to keep our priorities in check?
Well, I challenge you today to sit down with your spouse and talk about what are the hard and fast rules that you always want to do. What are the things in your life that come hell or high water, you are giving this money or you are giving this time? What is something that becomes a non-negotiable in your life? Because right now there are probably some non-negotiables that you ought to be living by, right? And so I would challenge you to sit down and have that. And it could be dollars and cents. It could be time. It could be both, right? But sit down and talk about what are the things that you want to do, that this just no matter what, every year we give this. Every year we do this. These are the things that we do, right? So I'd challenge you first to start there. Then second thing I would do is challenge your heart condition, right? Have you taken your gift today? Have you taken whatever your gift is, whether it's wealth creation, whether it's musical, whether it's family? Have you taken your gift and turned that into your God? Has something taken the place of God in your life that you worship? And you can tell if you worship it because it has all your time, all of your thought, and it drives your happiness, right? And has something replaced God on your life? And I would challenge you right now that it's probably time to repent and probably time to make some serious, significant changes in your life.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's all I've got today.
Thanks, Lauren. I hope this has been helpful. I know it's pretty convicting for those of you that stuck around and didn't turn me off halfway through this one. I'm sure you've been challenged. I continually am challenged on this. And this is what I want you to understand. This is a journey, right? Just because you've conquered something like this at once in your life does not mean that it's over, right? But it's exciting because when you reach new levels, you'll have new challenges. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about constant growth so that you can become a better entrepreneur, a better leader, a better to pursue your dreams in better and higher ways, and also to do it in a Christ-like way. I'm Devin, and I hope to see you next time.